Sí. We'll try where we want.
No puedo leer.
No, just like with the dishes at lunch. It never makes sense. You know? At lunch when you're eating right where you come.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Rabbi. I know you're sick.
Thank you. Thank you for your thank you.
Rabbi, it seems like a good.
Yeah?
Okay, so far,
Hope so.
it was actually a productive hour that I didn't waste.
Okay, I'm very happy.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we are the last thing we did in the Mishnah. I think we're up to the Mishnah 15. No, same Mishnah. In this Mishnah it says, one of the quotes of the Mishnah is Emer Ma'at Vasei Harbe, which means speak less and do more. So we're going to go to page 19, which we have some quotes from Gemara on this subject. Thank you. So basically, these words, say less and do more, the implication is a lot of different things here. Naturally, the implication is that action is what counts more than speech. And the implication is also is say less means a person should be cautious and careful with what comes out of their mouth. So let me go through some of these quotes here.
Is this on page 19?
19, yeah, in the booklet. First of all, we have a quote which also comes from Pirkei Avos. Lo matzasi guf tei mishtika. That's number one on the list, which means I didn't find anything better for a person. I didn't find anything better than silence. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean to say that a person is just better off to never talk? Of course, that's not what it could mean. But obviously it means like this. There's two ways to look at it. Some people are always talking unless they have a reason to close their mouth. And some people, their mouth is closed unless they have a reason to open it and say something. Basically it means that speech to be something that has a purpose, has a meaning, has a content. Because when I just let my mouth loose, then it'll definitely run into negative speech, negative towards other people, and negative in terms of allowing myself to say negative things. And especially when you talk about a relationship with other people, speech is extremely important because that's how you send messages to another person through speaking. And I think in Yiddish there's an expression, but of course can be translated to any language, and that is to remember, and if we would remember this, it would help us a lot in not saying the wrong things, and that is that whatever I didn't say today, if I really want to, I can always say it tomorrow. If I don't say it tomorrow, I can always say it the next day. But whatever I did say, whatever came out of my mouth, I can no longer take it back. In other words, when you say something and you said these words, now the other person heard what you said, it affects them the way they affect them, and you could no longer pull it back. There's nothing you can do about that. And they're going to interpret it the way they interpret it. And you might have to do somersaults in order to defend yourself or to excuse yourself. But once you said it, you just can't go back. You can't say, I never said it. So therefore, when a person is has an urge to say something, we should say to ourselves, listen, think about it. Because whatever you're not saying now, you can always say it tomorrow. But once you say it, once it comes out of my mouth, I can't pull it back. And then it's sort of too late. There's another quote, also from Pirkei Avos, Siog lechochma shtika, which means the fence for wisdom is silence. What does that mean? I mean, there's a humorous way of explaining it. Yes.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. I'm wondering, like sometimes it's too late to say something, and what's the balance between like to say something and to close the mouth? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but usually I think when I'm all emotional, upset, I think it's too late to something. If I say tomorrow, it's not going to have the same effect. I have to put my foot down. But usually, if I want to tell somebody what I think and what I feel, and I want to tell them something they did wrong, I could always do it later. Again, there are situations where it's impossible, but generally speaking, if I remember that rule, I'll be much more careful with what comes out of my mouth. Because I know that once I say it, it's irreversible.
Is there also a concept of like the opposite when you don't speak soon enough? Like
yes, there is, and that's on this list. We're gonna see. I guess that's what Rivka is saying. Sometimes you have to say something. Not saying is doing the wrong thing. I guess I'm not talking about not saying it, but sometimes the urge, I must say it right now. No, I'm gonna say it now. You in your head you think it's very important to say it now. But if you would allow yourself time to think about it, think about the consequences, the ramifications, how it's going to affect this one, that one, the other one, you might change your mind. So when it says that a fence for wisdom is silence, there's a humorous way of explaining it, and that is if you're quiet, people might think that you're smart. If you open your mouth and talk, they'll find out. That's a joke, so to speak. But what it means is a person who is always into talking is less into receiving. In fact, when I once taught this in a class, someone said that in English, the same letters, even though gematrias are in Hebrew, but the same letters that spell the word listen spell the word silent. If you're quiet, you can listen what the other person has to say. You can listen what a teacher has to say. You can listen what an older person has to say, and you can get guidance. Someone is in the talking mode, is always in the talking mode, not in the receiving mode. So, siyag l'chachma, a fence for wisdom, is to be silent and to be having a desire to absorb and learn wisdom rather than being the one who's always talking. Then we have what's written in Mishlei, Proverbs, written by Shlomo Melech, something which is maybe one of the most powerful statements about speech, where it says, this is number 3, Hachayim v'hamaves b'yad haloshon. Life and death is in the hands of the tongue. What that means, in a very simple way, is that very often people think, something I said, I didn't do anything. I didn't hurt the person physically. I wasn't being violent. I didn't get a hold of a stick and beat someone. I just said something. But words can destroy a person's life. Right now, in today's world, it's something which is very much on the that everyone is talking about. For example, bullying, and people are called names and they're being put down. It can literally lead to what it says here, God forbid, to a person losing his life. Because the words are really very powerful. And unfortunately, sometimes I guess you can speak to people who are therapists, they'll tell you, there can be people who are 40, 50, 60 years old, and they're still dealing with and trying to work with something that people said to them when they were 10, 12 years old. Words that went into their head, and they have to work, and it affected them in a certain way that it brings them down or makes them feel They have a low self-esteem because of that, and it affects their work, affects their relationship, affects every aspect of their life. But there's a very interesting story in Medrash. I think we can't go on without telling this story. But it's in a Medrash. So first of all, if it's in a Medrash, there's surely more depth to the story. But I want to tell you the story as it is, and then you can try to do your own commentary. But this is what it says in the Medrash. There was once a king, and this king was very sick. And all the king's advisors, the king's doctors, they all said that there is no cure for this disease. And based on that, he won't be able to be cured and he'd have to pass away. There was one person that he said that in the conventional way, there's no cure, but there is a way of curing this disease. And it's if he would drink the milk of a lioness, of a female lion. If he would drink the milk, that would make him regain his, recover and regain his health. But how in the world could you get milk from a lioness? Who could milk a lioness? So being that Shlomo HaMelech was the smartest of all men, they came to him that he should help them get it. So he sent the man, his name was Yoav ben Tzruya, which is the head of his army, and he sent him on the mission and gave him instructions what to do. He went to a place, there was a lion's den from the distance, and he had with him sheep. And the first day, he sent a sheep towards the den. And of course, the lions devoured the sheep, and that was their meal for the day. The next day, he walked a little bit closer and brought another sheep. And again, they devoured the sheep. And he did this every single day for 9 days in a row. But every day he walked a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. And the lions began to sort of trust him that he's somebody who's helping them, providing them with food. The 10th day, he brought another sheep, and he got so close that the lioness allowed him to milk her. And he milked the lioness, and now I had milk, and I was going back to the king to give him the milk. So Medrash says on the way back, it was a long journey, he fell asleep, and he had a dream. In the dream, the organs of his body are having an argument. The hands said, I get all the credit because I milked the lioness. The feet say, I get all the credit because without me, you never would have gotten there. And the brains say, I get all the credit because I, knew what to do. And then the tongue says, I get all the credit. And they all start screaming at the tongue, you? What did you do? You had nothing to do with this. This is his dream. And the tongue says, you'll see. Anyway, the next day comes to the king, he's all excited. And he tells the king, I got the milk. And he says, I got milk from a cat. And he starts screaming, a cat? Who asked you for milk from a cat? I don't need you to get milk from a cat. We need milk from a lioness. And the king was furious, throw him into the dungeon. And he's making, fun of us, making light of my situation. Tomorrow we're going to execute him. And that was it. At night, he's in the dungeon and he has a dream again. And all the organs of the body are screaming at the tongue. What did you do? What did you say? Look what you did to us. Yeah, I told you. I get all the credit. Okay, you'll see tomorrow. I'll patch it up. So the next day, before they wanted to execute him, to give him a chance to say something, and he said that, of course, I wouldn't do such a silly thing. I meant to say that the lion was as tame as a cat, but the milk is from a lioness, and if the king will drink it, he will be healed. So the king drank the milk, and he was cured, and he was rewarded, and so on. So Shlomo HaMelech said that life and death is in the hands of the tongue. So again, there's a lot of depth to the story, but on a very simple level, what does it mean that it's in the tongue? It means that the way you speak to another person could, God forbid, either destroy that person or give life to the other person. So first of all, we know in the positive end that positive reinforcement, giving a person a compliment, encouraging somebody that they can do things, that can change their life. That can build them up to a point of great success as a result of someone who said very encouraging words. That's all, just words. And on the other hand, that the opposite is also true, that by saying something negative, and there's a lot to talk about this subject, how to speak to another person. It's not that you're not allowed to say anything negative to a person, but it depends how you say it, under what circumstances you say it, what tone of voice you say it. Are you there to help the person, or are you there just to destroy the person? So we should never make light of speech, because speech is something very, very powerful. And that's what it means. Life and the opposite of life is in the hands of the tongue. Number 4, kol hamar b'dvarim mevi chet. A person who engages in excessive talk brings on sin. The question is, how do you measure excessive talk? So I think it's like we said before, people talk in a way that there's meaning, there's content, there's purpose. And excessive talk means that it's just talk without anything. It's just sort of just my tongue is loose. And when the person's tongue is loose, then ultimately the wrong things, the negative things will be coming out of your mouth. You know, people joke around, they make fun, they make jokes, and they don't realize that if you're not really paying attention, the wrong thing will come out of your mouth. For you, it's a joke, and people around you are laughing. For someone else, it could be something very detrimental in terms of their own personal life. So now the question came up, that means it's always good to be silent. Isn't there times when you have to speak? So I want to give you an example, showing you that in Torah, yes, there are times that being silent is actually the wrong thing to do. So that's number 6, Eov Sheshosek. Job, because he was silent. What does that mean? You know, there's one of the books of the Torah is called Eov, Job. And it's about a person who had tremendous suffering in his life. So the Gemara says that when Paro planned to torture the Jews, he didn't have his plans set out yet. He made a meeting with 3 of his advisors. One was Yisro, the future father-in-law of Moshe. One was Bilam. It is also found in the Torah that he's the one who tried to curse the Jews. And the third one was Eov, Job. And what happened was when he spoke to Yisro, Yisro defended the Jews, and he advised them not to do anything to hurt them, and he had to run away from Egypt. Bilam, who hated the Jews, he advised them to do the things that he did to torture them. Eov, he didn't want to say things that will defend the Jews because the king will be upset. On the other hand, he wouldn't want to say things that go against and to torture the Jews, so he was quiet. So the Gemara says that the reason why he suffered during his life was because he was quiet. In other words, there are certain times that when you're being silent, you're actually giving strength to someone to do the negative things that they're doing because you're not talking up. So when do you do what? Where do you draw the line? So here's again one of those examples where we need something called common sense to know that in some cases speech is a positive thing and it's going to bring positive results. In some cases, speech is a negative thing. So we have to be aware that they're both true, they're both values. And it depends what the situation is. It's an interesting thing when it comes to Torah study that there's a pasuk, the number 7 is a pasuk, Chaim Heim L'Motza'ehem, which means the Torah brings life to those that bring it out, and the Gemara says it means Torah brings life to those that bring it out verbally. The Jewish custom is when people study Torah, it's very different than reading a book. When people read a book, they read with their eyes. You don't find people speaking when they read books. When people study Torah, they actually say the words. Even if they're not studying with a chavrusa, just on their own, they'll say the words as they're learning. The reason for that is because of this source that says that Torah brings life when you bring it out verbally, when you speak. Because it's brought down that words are very powerful. And when you speak, it actually could generate much more either intellectual or emotional energy as you're speaking. So for example, when it comes to anger, the character trait of anger, what it says in Torah books, if a person feels that they're getting angry, they're losing it, what should they do? They should stop speaking. So you'll find that if you're very upset about something and then you start talking about what you're upset, as you speak, you get more emotional and more angry when you start talking about the subject, more than you were before. And that is because speech has a certain power to it, that it generates more energy emotionally and also intellectually. Trying. It also generates more energy intellectually, which means, and especially people who teach can testify to this, that when you're teaching, let's say Torah, and you're explaining something to another person, you'll find that as you speak, you'll find more depth to the subject than you knew before. You'll find new ways how to explain it, which you couldn't think of before, which means that by speaking, it actually help generate deeper intellectual understanding of the subject than without the speech. And that's why in the Torah, it's so important to bring things out in the speech. But at the same time, it can also work in the negative, that when I'm thinking about something negative and then I talk about it with a passion, the negative speech will generate more negative passion than just thinking about it. So thoughts are very, very powerful and very effective. It's one of the reasons why the human being is called medaber. You know, one of the things that comes up in Chassidus is that the world is divided into 3 categories. The plant kingdom, 4 categories. The inanimate kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom. What is the human kingdom called? In the Hebrew, medaber. Medaber means someone who speaks. Why would that be the way to describe a human being? It should have been not medaber, but someone who, it should have been chacham, a person who's wise, wisdom. What distinguishes a person from every other being in the world is the fact that he's intellectual. And the reason for that is because the power of speech, it says, is rooted in a very deep place in the soul. And therefore, it has the power to generate more intellectual energy, more emotional energy. And this is one of the reasons why a human being is defined by dibur, by speech. It's a very broad subject and needs much more time to explain it, but it's one of the subjects that's explained at length in Chassidus. Number 9 is another favorite quote from Gemara, Mila bezuzi, shtika betrei, which means I'll give you a zuz. A zuz was a currency in those days. Like I'll give you $1 for a word, but I'll give you 2 for silence. This is a very interesting story in Gemara that Alexander the Great once took 2 philosophers, and he said to them, I want to hear one of you represent the argument why speech is important, and the other one should represent the argument why silence is important. Okay, so they both had to think of a way of presenting their arguments. How can I explain that speech is important? Or what can I explain that silence is better? So the one who was supposed to present silence starts speaking about the advantage of silence. As soon as he starts speaking, the other guy stops and says, okay, you just proved that you're wrong. Because you had to speak in order to explain what is the advantage of silence. So you're using my thing. So again, it doesn't mean that silence does not mean Chas v'Shalom. The Torah is saying, always be silent. No such thing. On the contrary, we're told to speak to other people, to be sociable, to teach someone who you can teach Torah, to tell other people about good things that you know about, to say a good word to another person. So when we're talking about silence, it means that unless there's something with content and with meaning and purpose, I shouldn't really just let my tongue loose. That's what it means. Number 10 is a term that's found in Torah, nibul peh, which means an unclean mouth. Meaning to say that a person should train themselves that their speech should be refined speech. It's very interesting when we say the word refined speech. Refined speech doesn't always mean bad speech, say something bad or destructive, but not refined. So, for example, you might remember this from the Parsha, not that long ago. Esav and Yaakov. Did it ever come up in class? What was Esav's biggest mitzvah that he performed?
He honored his father.
Honored his father and his mother. They say, the Gemara says, that his level of honoring his father and his mother was beyond anything we could imagine. And one of the sages said, and he prided himself on how much honor he gives to his mother and father. And he told a story that one time his mother was walking down the street on Shabbos. She was wearing sandals and the strap ripped. So she could no longer walk with it. So he got down on his knees, put his hands under her feet so she shouldn't have to step on the pebbles, on the stones, and the rocks. And she walked home like that. So that's an amazing thing. And he added, but my honor that I gave to my mother is nothing compared to the honor that Esav gave to his parents. Nevertheless, Rashi says in Chumash that Yitzchak said to Yaakov that the voice is the voice of Jacob, the hands are the hands of Esav. In other words, even though he couldn't see who it was, but he said, whoever is speaking a refined speech. Esav spoke in a much more coarse way. Even when he came to his father and brought him food, the words in the Chumash are Yakum Avi, which means like, pop, get up. It was not that he did anything wrong because he honored his parents. It's just that he was a coarse person and he spoke in a coarse way. So we have to train ourselves that our speech should be a refined speech. Number 12, I'm going to skip 11 and go back to it soon. Number 12 is Divrei Chachamim Benachas Nishpoim. No, I want to say something more about number 10. Another form of translating refined speech is something which the Rebbe emphasized a lot, that we should always, when we speak, in our speech, we should emphasize the positive, not the negative. So if you listen to the Rebbe speak, I mean, you can hear it in the Hebrew, in the Yiddish, or follow it in the translation. The Rebbe never used the word death, he used the word opposite of life. He didn't say Yetzer Hara, he used the word the opposite of the Yetzer Tov. He hardly used the word bad, he always said the opposite of good. Why? Not to be pronouncing with my mouth something that's negative, something that's down, something that's destructive. So the Rebbe, for example, wrote letters to people in Israel, because in Israel, the word for a hospital is Beit Cholim, which means the house for the sick. And the Rebbe said they should change it and call it Beit Refuah, which means a house of cure. Because it's true. It's a place where sick people come, but it's also a place where sick people get cured. So what should be the name? The house for the sick or the house for the cure? So if you're focusing on the positive, you say the house for the cure. I was watching a video, and there was if you ever saw the rallies for children, like Ba'omer, the one who ran it was somebody, Rabbi J.J. Hech, one of the most famous personalities in Lubavitch. And actually, he's the one his children are running this institution. And he ran the parade. There was a parade every year on Lag Bomer. And every year when there was a parade, either it actually rained or it was about to rain. And we messed up the whole parade. So he was very concerned, and he wrote to the Rebbe for a bracha. It was very down because I think the forecast was that it's going to be a big rain on the parade. So it's going to be a very unsuccessful parade. It wasn't just a parade, it was a whole program outside in the street. So after the parade, he walked over to the Rebbe because he has the Rebbe for bracha. The Rebbe gave him bracha that everything should be well, and the weather was good. And he said to the Rebbe, "Thank you so much for pulling me out because I was really down." So the Rebbe changed the word. In Yiddish, he said "arishlep," which means from pulling me out, and the Rebbe said for uplifting. You see the difference? In fact, you're talking about something positive, bringing somebody up. But when you say pulling me out, you're at least emphasizing that there was something down and you had to pull out. And when you say uplift, you're just talking about uplifting, just something positive. That is another form of refined speech, to always try to use positive words about everything. And that will create positiveness in a person's way of thinking, person's way of feeling in their life. Number 12 is Divrei Chachamim Benachas L'Shmayim. The words of the wise are spoken softly, which means screaming and shouting is not the way of the wise. I'm not talking about a person who's teaching something, gets all animated about it, but in general, when a person screams, usually it's an indication that what they have to say doesn't really have so much content, so they have to be loud. Because the more content something has, the less there's a need for it to be loud. And the less content something has, the more there's a need for it to be loud. But this is a subject that needs a little bit more explanation. We'll have an opportunity to go more into it. But if you ever heard the expression in English that an empty barrel makes a lot of noise, ever heard that expression? It's found in Gemara. That if you take a can like a pushka, this pushka has coins in it. It's noise. Imagine if this would be filled from the bottom to the top and you would shake it. Would you hear noise? No. So the more empty it is, the more noise it makes. And that's pretty much the message. So when a wise person speaks, they speak gently. I don't mean you're whispering, softly, gently, not screaming and shouting. To be continued.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can
Yeah.
I ask you a question?
Yes.
I want to go home. I was gonna go this week, but it's too expensive. But I found like here, the middle of December until here. I asked her for this week, but I don't think it will work. But maybe here and here until here.
Same amount of time, it's a different week.
Yeah, it's like a week and a half. But I could still join your classes on Zoom. Would that work?
Enjoy.
Like it will be good. So I was actually productive for that hour of the day.
Yeah, I'm so happy.
That
Okay.
hasn't been happening for a while.
Did you do both things? You did a little bit of the reading, a little bit of the...
So we started kind of just doing the reading because obviously she was like, "Who are you? Why are you here?" You know.
Okay, just get to know each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like God willing, it'll just.
She's a very pleasant person.
Yeah. And she was surprised because as I was reading some of the words, I'm like, okay, so that's what this means. She's like, well, how do you know what it means? I'm like, I learned some of it in the other class. I just didn't do much in the other class.
Yeah, it'll take time for it to get to know your level.
Yeah, because it's once I have the reading down, learning the language, the vocab is the easy part.
Okay.
So
Good.
and also Hebrew is its own language.
You make up this will be here tomorrow?
Yeah, so then she'll be here Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it's not Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was gonna learn with my Rebbitzin on Tuesday, so I'll just see if Thursdays works for her instead. Just because,
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you for orchestrating that.
Thank you. Get better.
Okay, thank you.